Hola. How's everybody doing? This is our Saturday pop culture stream. Today we're going to talk about Superman, James Gunn. We're going to get into that. We're also going to talk extensively about Clipse. Let God sort them out. We may get into a little bit of Raekwon, the Emperor's New Clothes. So we got rap albums, we got movies, we got things to talk about that are not politics. So this ought to be fun. I saw Superman twice, by the way, bootlegged, of course. Um, so we're going to go through the movie. I'm going to give you my thoughts, opinions, such and such, and then we're going to go through the Clipse album. Let God sort them out, and we're going to have some fun today. You're gonna overanalyze some pop culture stuff. How about that? All right. So Superman. Uh, I forgot the name of the guy. I think his name is Horn Sweat, something like that. Is playing Superman, and James Gunn is the director of the film. So my first thoughts on the movie is that it didn't really feel like a Superman movie. At the same time, it kind of did. It was very comic booky, which some people really liked, which other people are not going to be a fan of. Um, it's hard to say. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. The politics of the movie are less important than the overall theme of the movie. Yes, James Gunn wanted to make basically a Guardians of the Galaxy with DC comic characters. No, I don't think it worked. I think I think when you make a Superman movie, it should be about Superman. That's what I think. And I don't think this movie was enough about Superman. Now it was about Superman, like the central theme, the central plot of the movie revolved around Superman. That much is true. But when you had Green Lantern, Hawk Girl, Mr. Terrific, all in the movie, um, shit, I forgot the name of the the shapeshifter, Metamorpho. He was in the movie, and I wasn't as I wasn't as disgusted as some people were with the movie. But I didn't think the movie was great either. I thought that the actors were better than the script. I definitely think that the guy who plays Superman was a good Superman. I think the guy who played Lex Luthor was great. I think the young lady who played Lois Lane was really good. But I think the script did them no favors. I think the movie, if it was about the central theme of the movie, it probably would have been a lot better. Um, so let's get into it. I'm going to give you the skeletal structure of the movie. Of course, this is going to be spoilers for those who have never seen it. You're going to be you're going to be spoiled. There's no point in really doing reviews without spoilers. You know, you're going to have to give the plot away. So, Superman has existed on Earth for about 3 years at this point. He's been Superman for 3 years. He's already grown up in Smallville. We don't have his origin story. We don't see none of that. Some people think that that's a positive. I think you should set the standard if you are starting over. And I know a lot of people don't like that idea. They don't like seeing Superman and Batman, Spider-Man. They don't want to see their origin stories again and again. But I think new universe, new take on the origin. And that's basically what they did here. Is it was a new universe, so it was a new take on Superman's origin. This take on Superman's origin is that Krypton, of course, was destroyed, but he was sent to Earth for the purpose of repopulating Krypton or creating new Kryptonians. This becomes a really important crux of the movie as the Earthlings turn on Superman almost immediately after finding this out. Now, Superman again has been in existence for 3 years. Everybody knows him, loves him. Everybody likes Superman. That makes Lex Luthor jealous, so he looks to sabotage the Earthling's love of Superman. He breaks into the Fortress of Solitude. There's no explanation how he knows about the Fortress of Solitude. They did explain how he managed to break in, but I don't think there was any explanation how he knew it was there. In any event, there was also no understanding how he got Superman's DNA. Whatever. Ultimately, Lex Luthor's plan was he was jealous of Superman, which of course is a classic Lex Luthor motivation, because Superman is beloved by the public, and he thinks that human beings rely too much on Superman, which is a good point. But more importantly, Superman ruined his plan. There was a country called Baravia that was going to invade a country called Johanpur. And of course, this is very much coded as Israel and Palestine, as all of the Baravians were white, all the Johanpurians are brown people. And Superman stopped this invasion. And this invasion was supposed to net Lex Luthor all kinds of land and resources that he was going to use to build LexCorp in this foreign country. He had also been selling weapons to the Baravians. So he was basically a weapons contractor, defense contractor, who could sell weapons. And he was hoping that this invasion would go through, but then Superman broke it up. And now he has to find some way of destroying the trust in Superman. And in doing so, he figured he could turn the public against Superman, therefore turn the public against whatever Superman wants to do. And so he does this by breaking into the Fortress of Solitude, decoding Superman's final message from his parents. The final message from his parents was for him to go to Earth, and about how the Earthlings are simple people. You know, he's to go there and show them the way, be a standard of blah blah blah, and also create a harem and have children. So because the Earthlings find out that Superman is going to create a harem and repopulate the Earth, they turn on him almost immediately. And I'm thinking I don't know if that's a strong enough reason to stop for people to turn on him. I mean, if we was to find out that this guy has all these superpowers and he's going to repopulate his planet using Earthling women, as long as he has the power to, forcefully do whatever he wants to do, but that's not what he's doing. And Lex Luthor says that, well, he's grooming us. He's been here grooming us, saving all, handling all of our problems, dealing with all of our stopping the wars and stopping crime and all this, or fighting aliens and monsters or whatever. All so that we could trust him, so he could betray us in this way. Look, it's a legitimate concern to have that, a guy like Superman, even if he was, a good old boy, that he would have a kid who could go astray. That's a legitimate concern. But overall, there's no reason for people to be upset about Superman having a harem. It's like, so what? I don't know. It's kind of stupid. In this version of Superman, Lois already knows that Superman is Clark Kent and Clark Kent is Superman. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. And that bubble is burst. And I think WG Phil is correct. There would be a lot of women who would willingly be a part of Superman's harem if that's what he wanted. If he was to say, yes, people of Earth, the Kryptonians, there would be women who would just want to have an alien baby, let alone just have women who want to have sex with Superman, right? Then there's obviously just women who want to be like, hey, I get to have an alien baby? That's weird. Let's do that, So I'm not sure this works as a reason why the public should turn on Superman. Maybe he should have framed Superman for a crime or something like that. But I forgot to mention Lex Luthor also has a competing organization called Planet Watch, which features two metahumans, because the metahumans have been around, they said, for 30 years in this movie. And they didn't show that the metahumans were not well liked. I think that would be better. If you were to tell us that metahumans are not really appreciated, they're not really very well liked, and Superman is the strongest metahuman of all, and there's a lot of distrust of this guy. But they didn't really go that far. But so Planet Watch is the engineer, who is this woman whose body is made of nanites or something or other. And then there's a Ultraman, which is the clone of Superman. He's a clone created by Lex Luthor. He's also kind of a bizarro Superman. But nobody knew that at the time. It's revealed later in the movie that he is, essentially a bizarro version of Superman. He's kind of he's got all Superman's powers and abilities, but he's, how do you put it, handicapped. And he's basically being controlled by Lex Luthor via, words and shit, right? So this Planet Watch is Lex Luthor's organization. But when you see them, his raptors or whatever, who are the machines, they're attacking people in the city. Like, they're like, Superman is not here anymore. You guys are screwed. Blowing up buildings. I'm like, okay. I thought the plan here was for Lex Luthor to replace Superman. I thought that was all the plan, but apparently not. But Superman got beat up a lot. We're gonna talk about that in a minute, because I thought Superman was basically invulnerable, but he got beat up a whole lot. There was a giant monster that just appeared in the middle of the city. Superman fights this monster, and he has a great deal of trouble beating up this monster. He's the one thing I did like about this movie is that they put a lot of emphasis on Superman as a protector, that he is, willing to throw himself in the way of any sort of attack in order to help people, innocent people, which is the right thing to do as far as the big blue Boy Scout element of Superman. But he wasn't portrayed as being a problem solver, right? Superman seems to have to struggle figuring out how to do what he needs to do. And I think this was the problem of having all these other characters in the movie. And I think that monster in the middle of the city is the biggest slap in the face to people who are big fans of Superman, because let's say Superman doesn't want to kill this monster, which is everybody I've talked to, like, oh, Superman didn't want to kill the monster. He was trying to protect the monster too. He's trying to lead the monster away from the city and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, he's not smart enough, apparently, to distract this monster away from the people. He's certainly strong enough to have been able to lift this monster and carry it away. But we don't see really what the physical strength of Superman is in this movie, because we don't really see a lot of it. We also we see some of his speed. We see it a little bit. And that is really one of my main issue here is of all of Superman's powers, you only see them every once in a while. You don't see him rely on his abilities and his powers. And these are things that if he used his powers, all of these problems that he has would be so much easier to deal with. And that's one of my biggest issues here is he uses his freeze breath, I think, twice in the entire movie. I think he only uses the eye lasers once, and that's when he was surrounded by raptors. And he finally was starting to cut loose near the end of the movie. But when he was fighting all these various monsters and such, he would never use his powers. None of his super speed, unless he's going to use it to save a squirrel or a human girl or something like that. He doesn't use his super strength. He seems to be so pulled back that he looks weak. And that's been a big concern of everybody who's watched the movie, is that this is a Superman who gets his ass kicked literally all the time. And this is one of the things that people have said so much about Superman is that the character is basically invulnerable, and you have to create weaknesses in Superman. So James Gunn decided to do just that by weakening Superman, but it's pretty obvious that he's pulling his punches on everything. And it creates danger where there shouldn't be any. And that's a good thing because you want to see Superman get up and fight back. But you also don't see a lot of Superman getting up and fighting back. It's very weird. Superman gets captured by Lex Luthor. And this happens because Superman turns himself in, essentially for questioning about the super harem and all this sort of stuff. He ends up locked away in a pocket universe where Metamorpho creates kryptonite so he can't use his powers. He ends up talking Metamorpho, who is a simple creature. He's a very simple creature. And, he ends up talking to him, and they break free from the universe, from the pocket universe, with a little bit of help from Crypto, the super dog. And that damn dog. That was the worst part of the movie for me. The amount of times that fucking dog got involved. Like, the dog was already annoying because the dog is rambunctious, is untrained. It's a disaster. I don't understand how we have a Kryptonian dog anyway. I don't understand. This is very much a comic book thing that should stay in the comic books. I don't need a super dog. I really don't. And the dog kept having to save Superman. Superman can't save himself. He keeps getting saved by this fucking dog. On these 3 occasions, he would not have survived if not for the dog. And I'm like, I don't think we needed so much of this dog. I don't think we need so much of this dog. Now, in terms of Lex Luthor creating this pocket dimension, Lois Lane and Mr. Terrific, they get together to investigate this pocket dimension. Now, Mr. Terrific, despite the fact that I don't think he should even be in this movie, he actually was necessary here because Lois Lane needed somebody to be with her who understood science. So they gave Mr. Terrific something that only really he could do in the movie, which makes him important, And at that point, he's able to investigate the pocket universe. He helps find everything, and it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it really is. So at this point, where was I? All right, so he's holding these metas. I'm talking about Lex Luthor in this pocket universe where Metamorpho is keeping him in prison. Mr. Terrific and Lois investigate. The pocket universe is ruined when Superman breaks free. Superman and the other metahumans now break out. Earlier in the movie, there was a scene where Superman was sort of disappointed in all of the people who were upset with him about a super harem. And he was sitting on his couch moping about it while they call him the Justice Gang, which was Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Hawk Girl, and Mr. Terrific. I don't know why they chose this cadre of characters. Why were these 3 characters chosen? I don't know. But they were fighting another giant monster, and Superman just kind of let it happen. Just kind of like, yeah, they can handle it. Which I don't think is very much a Superman thing to do. Even if he is sort of down in the dumps, I don't really think that's something Superman would do. But all right, so once Superman is free, he is free just in time as the Baravians are going to invade the Johanpurians again. This time, Superman's not supposed to be there to stop it. And a little brown boy puts up the Superman flag, starts, Superman, Superman, Superman. At the same time, there is a whole lot of stuff going on in Metropolis. So they try to, Superman can't be everywhere at once. So the Justice Gang, Green Gardner, Green Gardner, yeah, Green Gardner. Let's figure that's a better way to tell who he is. He goes over with Hawk Girl and Mr. Terrific, and they stop the invasion. While Superman does battle with Lex Luthor and LexCorp and LexCorp's metahumans. This is where you actually see Superman doing something pretty cool when he destroys all of the Raptors with his eye beams, which I thought was pretty cool. And then he got overwhelmed by the Nanite Girl, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is what the fuck." So then we get the Nanite Girl and the Ultraman. They jump Superman. He flies them both up into the atmosphere. They didn't explain how the Nanite Girl was able to survive that, because even machines wouldn't be able to survive that. Really, if she's a living thing, a living creature, how did she survive outside of the Earth's atmosphere? How did that happen? Now, it explains the other guy, because the other guy's got Superman's DNA, so that makes sense. But how did the engineer be able to survive when they went into space? How did that happen? Anyway, Superman takes them both up into space. We get this whole story about Lex Luthor and his envy, how his envy is the hope of humanity, and I thought that was pretty good. Superman fights the Ultraman thing, gets his ass beat, gets his ass kicked, and he gets saved again by the dog. So Superman then gives Lex Luthor this big lecture about his humanity, how he's as human as everybody else, because he wakes up every day not knowing what to do, puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else, and his humanity is his strength. And one day Lex Luthor will be smart enough to realize that it's also his strength too. So the overall story here, and then Lex Luthor gets mauled by the super dog. So the super dog wins the day. Okay, fine. So the overall character arc of Superman, where we see it at the beginning, is that when Superman gets beat up, he goes to the Fortress of Solitude to heal, and he wants to hear the healing words of his parents. And those healing words are of his birth parents, the Kryptonian parents. And he listens to their message while he's healing. At the end of the movie, or near the end of the movie, once he needs to heal, he's listening to the Kents. He has tossed away his birth family and replaced them with his Earthling family and embraced his humanity. So the character arc of Superman in the movie is he goes from being an alien to being just like everybody else. He's no different than you and me. Obviously, this is the immigrant story. This is really what they wanted to push in terms of why this movie was put out there. And of course, that becomes a running theme through this thing is Superman is an immigrant. He has to release his home, his land of birth, and embrace where he is now. Now, of course, nobody ever says you have to do that, because when you see Mexicans flying Mexican flags, people say you're not supposed to have a problem with that. But in Superman, he throws away being Kryptonian, and even though he has that, and he still may appreciate his parents, he even turns against his parents. Now, when it comes to the Kryptonian parents, I know that this has been something that people have said has been borrowed from Invincible. I didn't get that far into Invincible, so I can't tell you for sure. Invincible just doesn't interest me that much, if we're being honest. But people say like this whole repopulating the destroyed planet or whatever is an angle from Invincible, and that it's been brought into Superman lore. My issue is that why are we trusting Lex Luthor when he tells you that this is what the note really said from Superman's birth parents, and it's just accepted that this is what it meant, and they didn't even in the movie at all try to say that Lex Luthor, tampered with it, or that it is taken out of context, or edited or anything. It is sort of just accepted that Superman's real parents are tyrants who care more about dominating Earthlings than about the future of their race, let's say. And the interesting bit about that is you could take that in several different ways, because when we read like the clan notes, the clan paperwork, I think that was last week or 2 weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago at this point. One of the things that they were very much against was race mixing, right? So I would think that if you were trying to make the Kryptonians the bad guys, they wouldn't want to race mix. They saying that you should go race mix. It's kind of, and that's literal race mixing, because we're talking about from separate worlds here. It's a little odd, but I get it. I just don't like the idea of Superman's birth parents being shitty. I didn't like that. But it is also the sort of leftist subversion of the family that they like to push, is that the children don't have to do what the parents want them to do. Like, in the Bible, it says that if you raise up your children in a path, they shall not stray from it, or something to that effect. It's like very loosely that way. But leftists try to subvert that all the time. So their subversion is that you should disconnect from your parents, you should disconnect from your actual family, and you should go off and do whatever you want, And there's an element of, there needs to be some independence in every generation. Clearly, I'm not saying that everybody needs to be what their parents wanted them to be, but there's a difference between what I want and what I want my parents, and what my parents want. There's a difference there, and you reconcile that. There's a difference between that and I'm going to completely disregard what my parents wanted and what my parents expected of me, and do my own thing. And sometimes that just makes people's life worse. In this situation, it's not going to make Superman's life worse. But ultimately, race mixing is the only option he's got, because the only Kryptonian that he has left is his cousin, right? So he really doesn't have an option but to race mix at this point. So it's an interesting movie. I didn't think it was great. John Cena makes an appearance in this thing as Peacemaker. He's shit talking Superman, basically saying Superman thinks he's better than everybody anyway. So there was a thing. It was okay. Well, ultimately, but it wasn't. It's certainly not my favorite Superman movie. I sat through it twice, so I didn't hate it. If I really hated it, I probably would have only watched it once. So let's go through the David Mamet questions, but I'm going to go through that after I read some comments. AJ3 says, to me, Superman should be Superman, not Marvel Superman. That's what I took from this. I think you make a good point. This Superman is very much grounded. He's very much human. Most of the time, I think Man of Steel led too much into the God on Earth kind of Christ narrative, right? When Superman is a Moses story, he's not a Jesus story. Okay, most people don't realize that, but that's what it is. And I know that it's sometimes in the Negro brain, there's no difference between Moses and Jesus, but there is. Okay, he's a Moses story. Superman is found as a baby, like Moses was found by the River Nile, right? He's found as a baby and he's raised, and he's rebuked by the people who raised him, to a degree. Now, that becomes an issue later on, okay, by Superman being somewhat rebuked by the humans, which is, Lex Luthor's part of the story. How, Pharaoh rebuked Moses, tried to kill him, so Moses fled. Similar to how Lex Luthor, as the representative of the evil within humanity, would rebuke Superman. Okay, but that's Superman's story. It is a Moses story. I think all previous Superman movies were obsessed with making Superman a Jesus or Christ-like figure that people worshipped. I don't like that. That I really didn't like. But that's often how people are portray Superman in modern day, is that he can do all of these crazy things, and he's almost like a robot, like in certain elements. And this is really why I think it had a an advantage over Man of Steel, because this Superman was very much human. He very much cared about the people around him. Man of Steel Superman, again, there was a bomb that exploded, and he didn't have any sort of reaction to it. Like, it killed a bunch of people, and he was unharmed, but he was kind of like just stoic. Well, this Superman is, people are going to die. Like, he literally cares about human life. That's one of the positives that I like that James Gunn made. But he should have been, there should be a mode of, all right, I'm not going to pull my punches anymore. I'm really going to show you what I can do. And that you really never really had a chance against me, because I am literally Superman. And I think that when he started fighting the Ultraman Superman, that's really when he should have cut loose. Like, when he's fighting the metahumans at the end, that's when he really should have cut loose and just been like, I'm Superman, right? Like, don't take, kindness for weakness. And that is a big issue with this movie, is that this Superman is kind, but he's also weak. All right. He wants to be nice, and he is nice. He's a nice guy, but he's also a doormat. Right. So you don't want that. And that pissed off a lot of people too, because you've made nice weak. These two things are not the same. Superman can be a nice guy because his strength comes from his confidence. And his confidence is because he can do all of these things. And he chooses not to do it. He could snap Lex Luthor's neck, by thumping him in the top of the head if he wanted to. He chooses not to. That restraint is his strength. But when you put Superman up against somebody or something that he can punch and they can take it, he should punch them and let them take it. Like, when he finds out, like, oh, this guy's a clone, all right, I can cut loose now. Eye lasers, freeze breath, knocking him into the sun or whatever the hell he needs to do. That would have been cool. You could have created almost like a Dragon Ball fight scene out of that. But they didn't go that route. They just still had Superman get beat up because, again, he's too nice. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. T Styles says the movie was ass and wasn't accurate like the internet would like you to believe. I don't think it was accurate either. I think they definitely nerfed Superman quite a bit. And I think nerfing Superman is problematic, but it creates probably the best story option, because otherwise we got Superman who's a flying tank and can't be harmed by anything. It can't be harmed by anybody. And that's boring too. So if you give me the option, I probably would take a more vulnerable Superman over, a flying tank that can't be harmed. But there's times and places for both, I think. AJ3 says this was about building the James Gunn DC universe with Superman, like when Marvel used Iron Man to make the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Sure, but at least the Iron Man movies centered around Iron Man. This movie, it centered around Superman, but there were so many other characters that it was almost like Superman was not necessary. And they showed you in that one scene when he's sitting on the couch and he's all upset, and you have the Justice Gang, quote unquote, out the DEI Justice Gang, just so happens to be a woman and a black guy, right? And another white guy. And they're outside fighting the monster, and Superman just kind of like, I don't have to do that. Instead of again, he feels like it's his responsibility to protect humanity. He pawns that responsibility off on other people because he was upset. And I think that, I think fundamentally there's a lot of leftists, they don't know anything about men. That's a big problem. That's a big issue with writing characters like Superman is you don't want to turn him into a big blue softy, which is what they did here, but you also don't want to turn him into flying tank god, which is what they did in Man of Steel, And I think Man of Steel had better fight scenes though, because he was a flying tank at that movie. So when you had Zod or whatever, it was pretty cool. Lex Luthor being petty. Well, that's Lex Luthor. And he can't hurt Superman any other way. So he got to be petty. WG Phil says those feels like a self-insert James Gunn when he outed for attending a PDF party and his tweets and got fired from Marvel. Yeah, he's a creep, by the way, and I wish that he wasn't involved with any of this stuff. He's an absolute creep. And I do remember those tweets, by the way. WG Phil says, feels like the Justice Gang Society movie that happens to have Superman. I'm really tired of James Gunn giving his brother roles. Dude is playing 5 characters. I don't even remember what his brother's name is or what characters he played in the movie. I wasn't paying that close attention. The Biz says this film was a comic accurate Superman. A lot of people seem to not have read a comic. Now, comic accurate Superman, well, I don't think so. I think Superman is a nice guy in the comic books. I mean, it's just, the core of his character is that he's a nice man. He's a good guy. He always pulls his punches. He wants to protect and save everybody, but he's not a doormat. And I think when people write Superman to be a doormat, that is a problem. It's just hard to get away from that, But, and he was getting beat up by things that he probably shouldn't have got beat up by. And so, but it was probably in the balance of Superman. Man of Steel was probably not Superman at all, but this is more like Superman than the Man of Steel Superman in terms of personality and in terms of the size of the man playing him, his overall humanity, him being kind of a dork. That stuff was good. But the portrayal of Superman as, ineffectual, he can't stop monsters by himself. He can't stop the metahumans by himself. He can't do anything by himself. Like, that's a problem. Like, I don't like that. Superman has always been able to handle his own issues, and the other characters handle things where Superman literally can't do things more than once. So there's a problem with that. You said Superman can be hurt by magic. Sure, but there's no magic in this movie. There's no magic. I also didn't know how they knew about the kryptonite. And maybe that was something I missed in the movie, but how did Lex Luthor know that Superman was weak to kryptonite? How did he know that? Oh yeah, he stole that information from the Fortress of Solitude. Okay, that makes sense. It said Christopher Reeve's son was in the film. Props for that. Sean Gunn plays Maxwell Lord, Weasel, Calendar Man, and G.I. Robot. Well, I didn't know this, so I wasn't tripping. I didn't know all these characters were even in it. I don't think we needed them, but it's clear that they're starting to build a universe, and that was the whole point of this movie, is that now there's going to be a bunch of stuff spinning out of this film. And I wish movies could just stand on their own and not be part of some universe now. And I think that's a weakness of the movie too, is they're so focused on building something that doesn't, well, Superman is going to be an ancillary part of it. And it feels to me like we should have just focused on really solidifying Superman here. He said the best Superman interpretation is the animated series. I kind of agree. I think they hit the right note there. It's one thing that Hollywood is obsessed with is turning humans against Superman. They've done that so many times in these movies where they'll have Superman get people throwing paper and cups and stuff at him, and of course he's invulnerable, so these things don't hurt him. But the point is, they're obsessed with making people hate Superman, or the public hates Superman for some reason. It's one thing for the public to be distrustful of Superman, and I think that the conversation that they have with Lex Luthor, I mean, not Lex Luthor, I'm sorry, but Lois Lane, when they have the interview in his room or in their apartment, and Lex, and she's asking him questions about who did he talk to about, getting involved in Baravia, because he could be taken as being somebody who is acting on behalf of the United States government or whatever, or acting on behalf of the United States. And he's like, no, I'm just, doing my own thing. And she's like, okay, well, we understand that nobody tells Superman what to do, but you never know what foreign governments or what people in other places are going to think when you act, unilaterally. At the same time, though, he doesn't need anybody's permission to go and start saving folks. Okay, he really doesn't. So the idea that he needs other people's approval to do things is kind of nonsense, right? But it's something to consider, at least. And I like that conversation. I thought that conversation was good. And I think that conversation is the conversation normal people would have if a person like Superman really existed. Is what happens if he's wrong? Or what happens if Superman decides to take a side that we don't necessarily like? And this is something that has happened very often in the comic books, and especially in recent years, where they'll have Superman protect illegal immigrants or something like that. It's like that's something Superman would do, and you created a scenario in which people who say that illegal immigrants should go home are the bad guys, and Superman's going to protect the illegal immigrants. And that's if you're going to shoot them or something like that, that's absolutely something Superman would prevent. So you're creating a scenario in which Superman is going to be involved in a political struggle. And if we were in the real world, and we often are, when they tell these stories, if Superman was out there fighting ICE agents, we would be like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? What is he doing? We would say, okay, if things are getting rough, it makes sense. But we would say, who gives this guy the right to prevent the will of the people? Like, it's one thing to say there's a war that's about to occur and people are going to die in this war, or he's shooting down rockets or something like that. But when he's interfering in policy decisions, which he can do unilaterally and nobody can stop him unless we're going to stockpile kryptonite, that is a question we will have. So I'm glad they had that conversation. And I wish they would have had that conversation maybe on television or something like that. And that was the reason why people turned on Superman, is they're like, well, Superman thinks he can just do whatever he wants. Like, how can we trust that? Because nobody is always right, and Superman is not perfect, because that would be boring, and I liked also that when they were having a discussion about the invasion, that Lois Lane brought up that Johanpurians are not exactly, the best people for Superman to be protecting. And Superman's like, okay, so they're less than perfect. Yada, yada. Again, I wish they would have had this on television. And that was the reason people turned against them, is because they're listening to him, and maybe Lex Luthor is propagandizing the people against the Johanpurians. and Superman's trying to protect them. But you would have had to go all the way with the story, similar to how we have to really have conversations about Palestine and Israel. We have to have these real conversations where people are like, gays for Palestine. It's like there are no pro-gay Muslims. That does not exist. Okay, like it literally doesn't happen. There's no pro-gay Muslim country in the entire world. There's over 5 billion Muslims in the world. You probably can find tolerant Muslims, but they're not pro-gay. All right, no. There are a lot of real conversations we could have had if you wanted to make it political in that way. What they wanted to do, however, is just show that Superman was willing to intervene to protect seemingly innocent people. And I think that's the best way to look at it. How they coded them in terms of white people and brown people, that of course takes your mind a certain way. But in reality, they were just showing you that Superman is willing to involve himself and make decisions on his own without going to, the president or anyone else. He is essentially a rogue actor. And this is what, in the Marvel movies and also in Marvel comics, that they have this conversation about the Civil War, because all the superhumans are just getting involved in fighting crime. They're doing it on their own. And what happens if they screw it up? There needs to be accords to stop them from doing these sorts of things. And that, of course, creates civil war, the Marvel Civil War. The idea behind Superman getting involved in these sorts of things, it could create a similar situation, but they didn't go that far. But it seems like they planted the seeds a little bit. The video says, comic Superman sat and talked with a woman about to commit suicide overnight. He cried with her. Gunn talked about in an interview too the basis for Superman's humanity. Yeah, I mean nobody's saying that Superman's not human. That's the issue here. We're saying that he's weak. That's the issue here. The issue is not that Superman has sympathy and empathy and that he's a kind man. All of that's true, but that should not be mistaken for weakness. The problem is that all of this is being mistaken and positioned as weakness in Superman. We don't see him being physically strong and physically able to stop these things, but also having that contained rage or that sort of contained ability to control the situation, right? He raises his voice a lot, which shows that he's very animated, very emotional. He actually, I don't know, if I remember, I think he might have cried in this movie too. I'm not sure. If so, I don't really remember it, so I can't really complain about it. But nobody has a problem with superheroes showing empathy and being sympathetic. I didn't have a problem with Superman wanting to save people, throwing himself in front of, dragon breath or whatever the hell in order to protect human life. Nobody has a problem with that. The problem is he can do that and then also punch the lights out of the monster, and he didn't. So he trying to lure the monster away instead of knocking the fucking monster out, which we know he can do. And then he, stands by and watches Mr. Terrific kill the monster in 10 seconds, and he just kind of like, oh man, like, come on. If you really wanted to protect the monster, you would have handled this situation before they got here. You very well perfectly have the ability to do so. All right. But you chose not to. You chose to fly around and let this thing destroy buildings and all this kind of stuff. You look like you are overwhelmed. And you lose control of the situation when you look like you're overwhelmed. WG Field says Weasel and Calendar Man was Suicide Squad from 2021, and G.I. Robot was in Creature Commandos. Maxwell Lord was probably the guy talking about the Democrats and Republicans can agree about Lex Luthor. Didn't they have Rick Flag in this movie? Wasn't he near the end? It seems like they're about to do another Suicide Squad movie, huh? Because I think Rick Flag was near the end, or was that Maxwell Lord? It might have been one or the other. This movie was 2 hours, bro. It was a little long, but it was okay. I think overall, it's uh, it's not terrible, but it's not great. It's not a good movie in the Superman canon because I think he's a little weak in this movie. Um, I don't think Superman really was in control ever, and I think that was an issue. He needed to be in control of the situation, you know. And we also didn't see Superman stop the war. Like the Justice Gang stopped the war. Superman was fighting robots and getting beat up by metahumans. So he didn't even stop the war the second time. The Justice Gang did. So it was weird, man. But I loved the guy who played Lex Luthor. I thought he was really good. I thought the guy who played Superman was really good. I just don't think that the script did them the best. I think the script let them down. Do you think this is the most vulnerable we've seen Superman in all the movies of Superman? I do. I do. Like he started the movie beat up, and we don't even know what happened to him. But he was beat to hell, coughing up blood, and we're like, what on earth has happened to this guy? You know? Like I'm okay with Superman getting beat up. I'm okay with Superman being physically vulnerable. I actually prefer it. But we don't know what's going on there. And I'm not a big fan of the robots either. I'm not a big fan of the robots, dog. I didn't like the robots. I didn't like the robots. I didn't like the super dog. I certainly didn't like Supergirl at the end. You know, with her being like a drunken idiot. I didn't understand that. Um, Guy Gardner was okay. I think it was comic accurate, the Guy Gardner character. Hawk Girl. I don't read enough Hawk Girl comics. Mr. Terrific, yes. It kind of had a Mr. Terrific feel to it from all the Mr. Terrific comics I've read. But I just don't know why these characters are in the movie. I thought it was interesting what they did with Jimmy Olsen, turning him into a ladies' man where all these women are obsessed with him. I thought that was a fun subversion of the character because usually he's a dork, you know? But having all the women who are absolutely in love with Jimmy Olsen was fun. He said the guy who played Lex also played Beast in the X-Men Origins. Oh, I didn't know that. That's one of the movies I pushed out of my brain. I don't like X-Men Origins. uh, I pushed that movie right out of my head. But I think the guy who played Superman was really good. I wish they'd write a better movie next time where he could actually show more and do more and be strong. And still keep that same characterization of being down to earth, but being able to cut loose and be who we know Superman can be when he lets it go. That was a big issue for me. Like I was thinking he's finally going to cut loose once Clark has sort of come out of the the pocket dimension. Now he's back on Earth, and he's being called to Johanpur to save these people. And LexCorp is acting crazy in the city. He's finally about to cut loose. You know, he's about to show these people what Superman really is and what Superman really can be. And he flew out there and got beat up. I was like, oh hell no. Oh hell no. He said Nicholas Hoult, who played Lex, auditions for Batman for the Batman and Superman for this movie. Oh yeah, I heard about that. I heard that he wanted to play Superman in this movie and he didn't get the part. So they gave him Lex Luthor. He was really good though. He was good as Lex Luthor. What did I think of Guy Gardner? I think it was comic accurate. In recent years, they've made Guy Gardner even more of a jack off. But him being sort of the abrasive Green Lantern, the sort of confrontational one, that's kind of what his character is. He's kind of a dickhead. So it made sense that that would be his role in this movie. So I didn't mind that. I just don't see why he was in the movie. I don't understand why we needed Guy Gardner in the movie. I don't think we needed any other characters. I think Superman should have been enough. That was my view. I don't think we needed Hawk Girl. I don't think we needed any of these characters. And Hawk Girl murdered the Baravian leader, right? She killed him. And that was it. she didn't really have much going for her in this movie outside of screaming and swinging around her mace, and then she murdered a guy. I mean, he was a tyrant, and he kept trying to invade a foreign country, but Jesus in heaven, she just murdered the dude. She threw him like 10,000 stories or whatever. It was nuts. I don't know, but it just goes to show that all the other heroes have no compunction about killing. They don't care about any of that stuff, while Superman does. He's trying to protect all life, even the life of the villains. But he didn't do anything when Krypto was swinging Lex Luthor all around and banging his head against metal objects and shit. He didn't do anything. He just kind of let it happen. That dog, I hated that dog so much. Ugh. Ugh. I hate that dog so much. I don't know what to do. Mark Forster says, do you think the Supergirl movie going to be good since James teased it for 2026? I'm not going to watch it. I don't really like Supergirl. I think that any characters outside of Zod and his crew that has Kryptonian abilities weaken Superman's lore. That's just my view. I think the last son of Krypton should be that. I don't think there should be, oh, this is the last son of Krypton, but not really, because there's all these other Kryptonians too. Like I don't like that. I understand how that's how it operates in the comics, but in the movies, bringing in all those other characters who have same power set as Superman is just pointless. It makes Superman pointless. All right. The question, of course, I have is, where was Supergirl all this time? Superman was getting his ass beat. Where was she? I don't know. He's dog watching, guys. He's dog sitting for her. Really weird stuff. And he's like a bumbling big brother in a sense, which I wasn't a big fan of. That also was another thing I didn't like, is that how the dog didn't really respect him. Like, just kind of ran about, did whatever it wanted. He had no control over the dog whatsoever. And then you find out it's not even his dog. So he can't discipline the dog. And it's like, come on, man. Shit. Like, this is ridiculous. It's truly ridiculous. And somebody needs to do something about it. Like, something needs to be done. I hate to break it to you, but I don't like the guy having an unruly animal constantly yanking on his cape and grabbing him by the ankle and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of stupid. I don't like that. I think that he should be viewed as being competent. And I think too often in this movie, he was incompetent. And I think that's part of, they wanted to show that the character was vulnerable, but there's a difference between vulnerable and incompetent. He could be vulnerable in so much as he jumps in front of the dragon's breath and gets, burned and singed and all that. But he has to retaliate in a way that makes sense and makes him look strong. When he doesn't really retaliate, it's like, what's the point here? Also, I had a problem with the people. I don't think the people were panicking enough. You think if there's a giant fucking monster in the street, people should panic? It was almost like people were like, oh, hey, there's flying robots here destroying buildings. What's going on? You would think that people would panic and scream and run about and all this sort of stuff. And that would create all sorts of chaos and issues and all that. But it can't be perfect. But ultimately, I liked the characterization of Superman. I just didn't like that he was weak and that he did not control situations that I think would have been sensible for him to control. I liked Lex Luthor, his motivations being extremely petty. Makes perfect sense. That's Lex Luthor. So, but overall, if you say out of 10, I'll give the movie a 6.5. I think that's fair. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's not gonna make you hate Superman. It's not gonna make you love Superman either. All right. So David Mamet questions. 1, what does your hero want? And it says, I say Superman is a protector of life, first and foremost. And in the film, he doesn't really have much of a motivation outside of wanting to protect people and not wanting them to suffer. Later, he does want to prove his humanity, however, to prove that he's not there to conquer Earth, that he's there to help, not to do any harm. But that comes a little bit later in the movie. The movie is not driven by what Superman wants. 2, who stands in their way? Well, Lex Luthor does. Lex Luthor is creating wars for personal profit. You created Planet Watch to get praise and to show humans that they do not need Superman. And that, of course, undermines Superman's desires to be seen as a human and to be wanting to. He's not necessarily against Lex Luthor wanting to help, but Lex Luthor is against Superman wanting to help. And this is very much in the, I think, For All Seasons comic, where that becomes a big issue, where Lex Luthor tries to do things to run Superman off. Like he can't beat him in a fight, so he can, discourage him and demoralize Superman. And that's really what the idea behind Lex Luthor is. He's no physical threat to Superman, even though he wants to be. But he can emotionally attack Superman. And that's really what he tries to do in this movie. 3, what happens if he doesn't get it? Well, at this point, I think you should rephrase this question to what happens if Superman fails and Lex Luthor succeeds? So what happens if Superman fails to prove his humanity and fails to protect, with these 2 things that he wants to do? Well, I think in this situation, what ends up happening is Lex Luthor enslaves humanity and they become reliant upon him for protection. And he, of course, creates wars for profit, which allows him to control both sides of every situation. He gets to protect Earthlings from aliens and stuff like that with Planet Watch and metahumans and such. But he's also one of the biggest war profiteers on planet Earth. So at that point, Superman needs to succeed to prevent Lex Luthor from using the Earth as a plaything, essentially. And why now? Why is this movie taking place? Well, the movie is taking place because Superman just prevented war's invasion of Johanpur. This is right afterwards that we get Superman found outside the Fortress of Solitude, all beat up and screwed up and fucked over. So after he spoils his plans and gains control of, spoiling his plan of gaining entire control of a country and its resources. So again, 6.5 is probably the best thing for this movie. I don't think that it ain't going to offend you, but it's not going to, it ain't going to change your day either. I don't think that it's a great Superman movie. It's an okay Superman, and he's more of an accessory in the movie. It's more of a ensemble cast with Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner and Hawk Girl and Lois and Jimmy Olsen and Crypto. It is what it is. All right. So that's Superman. We spent an hour on Superman. My goodness. I wasn't expecting to spend so much time on Superman. So let's talk about Clipse. Clipse had a new album called Let God Sort 'Em Out. And there was a great deal of excitement around this album, far more than I expected. And also, I didn't really realize it because it seemed like time flew. But that was 15 years thereabouts in between the last Clipse album and this one. I remember when to the Casket Drops came out. I remember that. I think it was 2008, 2007 or something like that. And it wasn't the best Clipse album. And at the time, it was not announced as being the last Clipse album. I think shortly thereafter, Malice decided to go away on hiatus, and he decided to be he wanted to go more into Christianity and didn't want to really delve into the darkness of rap anymore in the music business, and not really wanted to be a part of it. And I really didn't realize that it took so long for the new album to come out. All the hype around this album was almost 100% because Push, his growth in the last 15 years of how he kept the name alive and how he kept the style alive. Because the Clipse had the same style, both Malice and Push had the same style. The difference is in their approach to it, and Push was the Clipse of themselves were a popular duo, but they weren't the most popular duo. Like in the lead up to the album, there was a lot of conversation about whether Clipse was like a top 5 duo or anything like that. I can tell you, I'm a huge Clipse fan, always has been. Nobody ever was having that conversation back when they were dropping music regularly. There was never any conversation about Clipse being a top 5 duo or anything like that. There should have been, there really should have been, but there weren't too many conversations about whether they were better than UGK or 8 Ball and MJG, or they're better than Mobb Deep or anything like that. Nobody was having that conversation. All right. They simply did not have a strong enough body of work, and nor did they have enough time. And they were from Virginia, which is in the South technically, but most people are kind of like, there are Southern heavyweight duos, Outkast, UGK, 8 Ball and MJG. They're not from the far South. And then they're certainly not from New York, where you had EPMD, which shouldn't count, but they do. Run DMC, Mobb Deep, and then they're not from the West Coast, which of course had Above the Law. I know people might like Above the Law, yeah, but Dog Pound. I forget them. There got to be some other West Coast duos. What am I thinking of? Second to None, but they worked primarily with DJ Quick. And they weren't from the Midwest. There really aren't any big duos from the Midwest, but they were from an odd place on the map. And so there was kind of like this weird, they're dope, but they were not seen as being one of the top groups. But in the rollout to the album, because Push had remained relevant for so long, pretty much by himself, due to his solo material, it lifted the Clipse in terms of their duo material, because as people became more fans of Pusha T, they became more fans of Clipse because they went back and listened to the duo albums, which is the right thing to do. And so I started hearing more people have listened to the duo albums than I ever heard before when I was buying them out of record stores. So the rollout was very impressive. They were on everything. They were on Colors. I think they did Joe Budden. They did The Breakfast Club. They were on everything. They did Tiny Desk. Their Tiny Desk was very good. It was very short though, but they did a very good Tiny Desk. They were everywhere, and it was excellent, the rollout. But I was wary when Ace Trumpets came out. I was like, this is fly. This is really dope. But then again, I liked the Clipse. I didn't think other people did. When So Be It came out, I was like, this is fantastic. And then I started seeing other people like, yeah, this is good shit. And I was like, okay. But the most impressive thing about all of this is how many people converted on Malice, because he was the guy that most people had never even really listened to. He had 2 solo albums that did nothing because they were mostly independent. They were Christian rap albums. He didn't really make any waves. When he went back to being secular, and So Be It changed everything. Ace Trumpets was a really good one for him, but So Be It changed everything. Not everybody's like, hey, I think this guy might be better than Pusha T. And I'm like, well, hate to break it to you, but he always has been. you know, he always was. So going into the album, the hype was high, and I didn't think that it would live up to the hype. I was kind of like, or I was expecting sort of Till the Casket Drops again. That's kind of what I was expecting, which is not their best album. So I was like, okay, we will be lucky if we get another Hell Hath No Fury, which is probably my favorite album from Clipse. Lord Willing is probably objectively the best Clipse album. I wasn't expecting them to put out the best shit they've ever done. I wasn't expecting that. Right? Malice is 52 years old. Pusha T is 48 years old. I wasn't expecting these dudes at 50, an average age of 50, to put out their best material. I wasn't expecting this. All right? But this is the best Clipse album ever released. It's better than Lord Willing. It's better than Hell Hath No Fury. This is the best Clipse album. It is almost on par with Daytona, which is, of course, Pusha T's album. In some ways, because I'm more of a fan of Malice, it's better than Daytona. It's Almost Dry is also a fantastic album from Pusha T. And this is on par with those. It cleared the bar as far as I'm concerned. And I purposefully waited a little bit because I wanted to see what the reactions were going to be. And people started dropping verses. Like, this was the first time in a long time where people weren't just talking about the beats. They were talking about song structure, verse structure, flows. Like, the real hip hop nerds got into this thing and pushed it like heavily. They were the ones pushing it. And I was like, wait a second. This is unreal. I wasn't expecting this, right? So then I listened to it. And I was like, holy shit. The best thing that they could have possibly done, and to me, this is one of the best things you could do in music. One producer for the entire album. Because you get one complete vision. You get a cohesive message. You get a cohesive sound. Pharrell doing this album by himself was the best thing they could have possibly done. This, to me, groups have separated for long periods of time. This group didn't break up. This was just Malice wanted to go do his own thing. Groups have gotten back together, and never have they gotten back together and were better than they were before. Wu-Tang has separated 100 times, gotten back together for revival albums or something like that. Never reached the same level as Enter the 36 Chambers or the Wu Forever. Bone Thugs and Harmony have separated 100,000 times. They never come back together and reach East 99 Eternal or The Art of War or anything like that. Mobb Deep has had revivals where they had like a G Unit revival that was really terrible, if we're being honest. Capone and Noriega had a revival when Capone went to prison. Nori was doing solo albums. When Capone came out, they did the reunion, which I think is the best CNN album. But then there was no CNN album after that. UGK didn't really have an opportunity to do any sort of revival. But of groups that separated for a long period of time and then got back together, this has got to be one of, now the Tribe Called Quest, they did a really good one. Their most recent one before Fife passed away. I think it might have been released posthumously after Fife passed away. That was a really good revival album. But I think Clipse picked up where they left off. But it also felt a lot like another Pusha T project with just his brother on it also. So there's that benefit as well. So the rap nerds who really are into cadence and song structure and flows and diction and clarity of voice and cohesiveness of vision and song structure and all of that, all of those people were really pushing it. Then you listen to it, and I was dumbfounded by how good it was. Now, 13 tracks, which is not long, but it doesn't need to be. There's only one song on here that I was kind of like, maybe they could have got rid of that. But other than that, 13 tracks of pure pith. All right. It started out with Birds Don't Sing. Classic 5. This is a great song. 5 out of 5. All right. Storytelling about the death of their parents. Their mom passed away. Then they said 4 months later, their dad passed away. If you listen to Malice's verse on here, it is so emotional. And they started out with this, which probably is the only thing about it. It probably should have been the closer. But go listen if you are unsure. Go listen to this song. All right, 5 out of 5. Fucking amazing. All right. The song everybody was most hyped about was the Kendrick Lamar verse. This is what got them kicked off Def Jam. So Chains and Whips was the second song. I'm not that huge of a Kendrick Lamar fan, but 4.5 out of 5. Really good record. This is where Pusha T dissed Jim Jones, say he's running from the spirit of repossession. At the time, I didn't know that Jim Jones' house had been repossessed. I didn't know that. So now I do know, and it's even funnier. And it's terrible. It's really terrible to make fun of this guy for losing his house and wearing fake jewelry, which is hilarious. Jim Jones is a 50-year-old YN. He needs to stop. He really do. He needs to cut it out. But everybody was super excited for the Kendrick Lamar verse. And it was a good verse. Kendrick Lamar is a good rapper. I don't necessarily think that he fits the theme of the song. He didn't go off the theme, but it just kind of felt like a generic Kendrick Lamar verse you could have put on anything, you know. But he did a really good job with the gin rhyme scheme. You know, that was really good, really put together. Kendrick Lamar was certainly a feature for the rap nerds, and he really fit. And the idea that they were part of the anti-Drake Avengers, I'm glad they shut that. I'm glad Malice at least shut that down, because he didn't have anything to do with that shit anyway. All right, so one of my favorite records was POV, 4.5 out of 5. The beat switch when Malice came out was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane verse. This is Malice again and again was crafting up nutty verses on this joint. All right. POV is one of them. It's tremendous. This song featured Tyler the Creator. There's a lot of people who like Tyler the Creator. I'm not one of them. I've never been a fan of Odd Future and Tyler the Creator. I've never been a fan of those guys. it's kind of weird for them to even be doing songs with Clipse, but it's one of the most streamed songs because Tyler the Creator has a very wide fan base, and they were willing to give them a chance because of this. And I saw a list of their most streamed songs, and this is one of them. It's not number one; it's like number 3 though. It's like 4.5 million streams or something like that for this one song. But Malice went nuts on this thing, just crazy. So Be It, of course, is a classic with the Arabic sample. Fantastic production from Pharrell. Great verses from both guys. Ace Trumpets, 4.5 out of 5. Really dope. This was the initial single. Really did a great job on this one too. All Things Considered, featuring The Dream, The Dream? You know, The Dream? I don't know. Another 4.5 out of 5 for this one. Malice was another one. It's just tremendous. They were talking about, this was another retrospective track. You know, Push talking about how his son wants a sibling, but they had a miscarriage or something like that. The second verse was, of course, Malice, absolutely crazy. When he talked about having children and leaving the children with his mom because it takes a village, I was like, God damn. But his verse was mostly about forgiveness, you know, and I thought that was really meaningful. And it's not necessarily an emotional record, but it could be. This is one of they actually dug in their bag a little deeper. Number 7, of course, is a hip hop fan's favorite, Mike Tyson Blow to the Face, where they both decide they're going to borrow from the Notorious B.I.G. This is where Push really went off. You know, if you start looking at it as who won each track, this is absolutely one for Push, right? He he said he had white slaveholder souls in his safe. That's crazy. The Bezos of the nasal. He went nuts on this shit. This is great. Very stripped down instrumental. Very much like Nostalgia from My Name Is My Name. I think that's what the album it was on. But Mike Tyson Blow to the Face is fantastic. 5 out of 5. Ibida is probably the weakest track on the record. There's nothing that really stands out. Like, it's not terrible, but it's a solid 3 in terms of it's a good glue between Mike Tyson Blow to the Face and FICO, which is number 9. 5 out of 5. Malice absolutely went nuts. Now, this is probably the best verse on the album. Almost unquestionably the best verse on the fucking album. It's so good that I'm going to actually play it. I'm going to play this verse. I had it saved in my bookmarks because so many people was talking about it. I couldn't wait to get to this track. But it's something. Where is it? Yada yada yada. I know that I'm playing with fire by playing any sort of music, but I'm gonna do it anyway because anybody who might be on the fence about listening to this album, this should put you over the fence if you're into actual bars, you know. Jacket, boy, I cook 'em. Fresh Prince jacket, boy, I cook 'em to the inside out. Go get a Glock 27, fit snug in the waistline. Both sticks came with the drum. I was 5'6", shoulder with a chip. Push a nigga to take mine. Index yank till it's numb. Used to call me Windex, cause this thing I spray gon' make you change minds. I done seen Hercules run. We was power lifting 2.2s. Nah, we ain't no gang signs. My brick walk was second to none. I would have them take a number like DMV. That was the baseline. Check out on register 1.
Miami niggas like Big Perm, cause they numbers was face on. You can show me nothing but love. When it comes down to it, every string of bells just needs an Avon. Won't sweep it under the rug. On the road with a low near the brake line, I knew where to place mine. I don't keep the gun in the glove. Hit the turnpike with the running lights that be on in the daytime. Cause K9 sniff out a crumb. Hands 3 and 9 on the wheel as I'm crossing the state line. Dumb diddy, dumb. Survival of the fittest. You either get acquitted or FaceTime. I done had an infamous run. My story's gon' hit the first 48 minutes on Dateline. Cause this really shit I done done.
Woo! This guy, man. There were so many times where I was like, this is verse of the year. I thought POV probably was the verse of the year when it comes to this album. But I'm tossed it up between FICO and POV Malice verses. This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. 5 out of 5. Track 10 was Inglorious Bastards. This featured Ad Liva. I forgot how they pronounce his name. I haven't heard this guy in years. He, of course, is an old collaborator of Clipse. He used to be on their mixtapes, the Re-Up Gang mixtapes. He was on Till the Casket Drops. He was on Hill. Was he on Till the Casket Drops? He was certainly on Hell Hath No Fury, and he was certainly on Lord Willing. I'm not so sure if he was on Till the Casket Drops or not. But the Re-Up Gang with Roscoe P. Coltrane, Ad Liva, Push, and Malice, they did some mixtapes together. He really killed this shit too. 4 out of 5. The DJ Clue drops on here I thought were fantastic. It gave it a mixtape feel for Inglorious Bastards. That mixtape feel really was something. It took you back in time. It took me back in time to the Re-Up Gang. And I really loved that. Even though they didn't do any fucking DJ Clue mixtapes, but it gave you the sound of the era. You know, in that early 2000s, there was so many mixtapes with like DJ Clue on there or Don Cannon or whatever. But I love the DJ Clue drops on here. I thought they were tremendous. Stove God Cooks, yes, I forgot he did the hook. I'm not really familiar with him because he's kind of new. I'm actually glad he didn't rap because I didn't want to have to, you know, I just wasn't interested in listening to other people rap on this album. Okay. But he did a good job on the hook anyway. I wasn't really interested in listening to like new rappers. So 11, Let God Sort Them Out / Chandeliers. A great record. Nas got the chandeliers part of the track. The beat switch. You know, it was a good Nas verse. The problem with it is he did a better verse for Raekwon, and it came out shortly, like a week later. And his verse for Raekwon was amazing. It was on the Omerta, all right? What Nasir is doing at, I don't know, he's in his 50s. I don't know how old he's, like 50 something. But he's crazy. And his pen game is better than ever. And I remember when that dipshit, I'll never forget Dream Hampton trying to get people to believe that Nas had a ghostwriter. Because it's been so consistent since 94. How could people believe it? It was so stupid. But Nas is insane. He did a good job here on Chandeliers. He didn't go crazy. He went crazy on Omerta. He did a good job here, though. They did a good job doing an alley-oop to Nas. I thought that was pretty good. They also did the DJ Clue drops on this, too. So that was pretty cool. So Far Ahead, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'm not thrilled with the hook on So Far Ahead. I've seen people criticize Pharrell for his vocal work on the album. This is the one where I criticize Pharrell's vocal work. I don't think he was great here. He's a little bit of a distraction, but overall, I think Pharrell did a good job. And track 13, By the Grace of God, 5 out of 5. Haunting beat. They sampled GoldenEye. Pharrell sampled the GoldenEye video game. It's very haunting. And it made me think about literally about what the song is about, which is, you've seen, killers and kingpins snitch, and it made me think about like Nicky Barnes and Alpo, and all those kinds of guys that ended up in prison, ended up turning evidence. Whitey Bulger, and even though he was an FBI agent for a long time, but that kind of stuff. But I think this was a strong closer, very strong closer. I just wonder whether if Birds Don't Sing might have been a better song to end on. But that's a really stupid thing to argue about, because this is a really great record. All right. Again, I've seen people criticize Pharrell singing on the album. Not on this one. I absolutely liked his singing on this one. And I think the album was tremendous. I think these guys did a really amazing job. They came back better than ever before. And I thoroughly enjoyed everything about this whole thing. And it really was validating for somebody like me, who was one of the few people who was a fan of theirs in 2006, 2008, around the last time they dropped an album. I've always been a supporter of Pusha T, his solo work and all his stuff with Kanye West and all of that. All the criticism of him being one note, I think, are incorrect, because as he says, he takes what he does. He's not trying to get any new fans. What he tries to do is push the subject matter as far as it will go, and you can see that in Malice too, because again, they have the same style. But you can see that both of them are taking the street element, what so many people have abandoned in terms of the perspective that they have abandoned. A lot of rappers now are mostly into doing drugs, not, being drug dealers. But taking that and taking it as far as they can go with it, but showing you the ups and the downs. And that's always been Clipse's strong suit, specifically Malice's strong suit. Push's strong suit has always been to show the luxury, the glamour, talking about how rich he is, and all that sort of stuff. That was great. That's typical Biggie braggadocio. Malice has always been more so, yeah, we got all of that shit. But then you also got people going to prison, broken families, all of that sort of stuff, the human element, where Push comes across like, typical drug dealer, and typical drug dealer rap, done in a very poetic way, very slick, very witty, and that's his strong suit. That's how he was able to keep the brand alive for so long. But then Malice comes in and brings the more human element, the guy who watches as the people have OD'd and the families have broken up. To me, the Malice's verses on this thing were next level. And maybe even his verse on POV might have even been better, now that I think about it. Because the best Malice verse ever is still on I'm Not You, which is off of the album Lord Willing. They did, I think that track was with the Locks, I think. Or is it just, I think it's with the Locks. They did work with the Locks. But if you are unfamiliar with the Clipse, go listen to I'm Not You. It's absolutely insane. And Malice's verse on that joint is hot. Every Malice verse sounds like a memoir. That's what it sounds like. That's what it feels like. And that's the benefit of him, and how he counteracts the Pusha T's braggadocio. They're a perfect duo where they have a similar style. but they take it in different directions. So they're excellent. This was an excellent album. I did listen to Raekwon's album too, The Emperor's New Clothes. It's okay. It's not the best Raekwon album. It's not the worst. It's a good one though. If you like Wu-Tang, you're gonna like it. But if you're not the biggest Raekwon fan, it's not gonna win you over. It's like it's a solid project though. It's not bad. Mark Forster said the run Clipse is on at the time of this album drop. I don't remember the last time I've seen a hip hop act or a group in this day and age, from podcast to Tiny Desk. Happy for these guys. Yeah, absolutely. And then also what's incredible is how old they are. For a rap group to still be relevant into their 40s, let alone their 50s, is crazy. There's a lot of conversation now about rappers in this age range still being able to do it and people still being interested in them. There's always been throughout hip hop this sort of you're too old to be doing this sort of thing mentality. And I think Andre 3000 sort of played into that too when he started playing the flute and shit. But these guys they're showing you that if you just want to make some statements and stretch what you can do, everything about it is about stretching and being the best creative that you can possibly be. Working with one producer throughout their entire album. You create one cohesive sound, one cohesive vision. It's a test for Pharrell. He's done this sort of thing before. He's produced whole albums by himself before. But knowing that Clipse is going to rap mostly about dealing drugs, right? But from different perspectives, in a different way, with different flows. And everything like that it's a challenge because people are now taught that there should be different producers for every song. You got to have a girls record. You got to have a club banger. You got to have a strip club record. You got to do all of this, do all of that. And it makes albums sound disjointed quite often, But this thing is cohesive as fuck because everybody seemed to know what they were trying to do here, which is amazing. Virgo Rebel Ping was I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was waiting on your thoughts. I appreciate that. Stove God Cooks. Mark Forster said Malice didn't miss a beat. Sometimes he felt like he was leaving Earth on some tracks. Man, at least 4 or 5 times I felt like he was in a zone. Right? All things considered, FICO, POV, I felt like this guy wasn't even human. Okay? When he put together his verse on Birds Don't Sing, that was incredibly touching, memorable. I love how he put that thing together. You really see how creative these guys are. They don't just rap about dealing drugs. How they switch flows, the different approaches, everything is crisp, which is the crazy thing. For guys this age, for their stuff to still be so crisp and clear, it's crazy. It really is. They've done a really amazing job. This might be. I'm still going to think about what group has come back after a long breakup and done an album so cohesive, and their revival album was probably better than anything they've ever done. Because I can't think of one. And I'm talking about really good groups and groups people would think is better than Clipse. And I certainly think Clipse is a top 5 duo. And I'm comfortable saying that now. Because especially since I'm not really a big fan of 8 Ball and MJG or Dog Pound or CNN or I'm not even really a big fan of Mobb Deep. I think Mobb Deep's second and third albums were good, which would be The Infamous and Hell on Earth. I think those two were pretty good. After Hell on Earth, I think Mobb Deep kind of had a decline. MOP, I never really listened to them that deeply, but I know a lot of people think about them very highly. But I was never really a big MOP guy. I am a big Clipse guy though. Pusha is more vocal in the media streets. Yeah, he's doing all the talking in the interviews too. Mouse was just listening. He was just listening a lot. Did I listen to Raekwon's? Yeah, I did. I'm kind of tripping on how you spell Raekwon. But yeah, I thought the Emperor's New Clothes was pretty good, man. It was a fine album. You know, very fine album. Not bad, but you know, not great. But I've been playing Clipse all week, and that's rare for me to treat a rap album like that. It really is, because usually most rap albums they come and they go. But I've been playing this joint incessantly, and I'm very happy for these guys because this is the most popularity they've ever had. You know, and a lot of that has to do with Push being involved not just with these beats with Drake, but also being signed to Kanye West and all the stuff that he's been putting out for the years. He does all the hooks for most of the tracks too. He does most of the hooks, and then Pharrell does quite a few, and then I think they had Stove God Cooks do a hook. So they really just let Malice do his thing lyrically, and they didn't ask him to carry too much more on the record. Just go in there and lay your verse down, and he killed it each time. Tremendous shit. M Studio says he watched Superman a few hours ago and really enjoyed it. I'm glad you did. I'm never upset that people enjoy things unless it's really like shitty. I watched Superman, like I said, I watched it twice. 6.5 out of 10 movie. Not the worst movie, not the best. Could have certainly been better. All right, y'all. It's a hour and almost 45 minutes in this thing. And I appreciate everybody for coming around at this hour. You guys have a great weekend. I'll be talking to you guys soon. We got a Q&A on Thursday. Be sure to put your questions in the question bin. Until then, I'll talk to you guys later.